Hello, everyone. My name's Malvika. I guess a few of you read my profile. I'm a puppy trainer at Anvis Inc. and have had several years of working with dogs, especially shelter dogs that require a lot of training for leash pulling and a lot of other behavioral issues. So very happy to be here. Thank you for having me. So it's Anvis Inc. That's the company I'm associated with as a part-time trainer. The other host, Antaleena, should be joining us shortly. I think I see her. Hey, Antaleena.
Hi, Malvika. I'm sorry about that internet connection. So yeah, let's get started. Our topic for today.
Yes, leash walking, the ever-challenging subject for us. So, do you want to have a quick introduction, Antaleena? I just give a quick introduction to myself.
Yeah, I think both of us have a lot in common. Both of us have grown up with dogs. We like being around dogs. We were born in the same month. And we were as puppy trainers at Anvis together. So yes, a lot in common. It's just that growing up with dogs has helped us with this profession so much, right? The things that you learn, as you grow up with them is way more than what you learn by reading and those kind of stuff. Observing. And then when you put that to practice is when you start realizing there's so much more to learn.
Correct.
Right? So yeah.
That is right.
Okay, so whatever we are going to discuss today is all about our experiences, right?
Yes.
So yeah, let's get started.
Yeah.
Where do you want to start?
When this thing was came up to me as leash walking, right? Remember those cartoons that were there where the dog's running and there's a person flying behind the dog with the leash? That's typically where we've started our journey, and now we've reached that point where the dog's actually right by our side, focused on us and less so on everything else.
Absolutely.
So I think
experiencing that, right? The flight.
Yeah. Yes. Who takes whom for a walk? That's always the question. It's always the dog walking most of the handlers rather than the other way around. Yeah.
Right. And I think we've honed our skills by doing small things like dog walking and things like that, right? Just to gain experience and to handle more dogs, just for that opportunity to work with them and really understand how leash walking actually works. We've done dog walking assignments, though we have a full-time job, and we're also doing puppy training. Whenever we get a chance, we do these dog walking assignments, and we go and walk different sizes, different breeds, different behavior, different personalities of dogs. Again, that
different accessories.
Yes, we've learned so much from that. So yeah, great. We are very excited to share all of that with everybody today, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's tough to contain everything in 1 hour, so let's try that.
Yes.
That's going to be our first challenge. But yeah,
absolutely. So let's get started then. Let's begin with what do we have? Introducing leash to a puppy. Just assuming that you brought home a puppy and not an older dog. We will talk about older dogs as well, but just let's start with puppies, right?
Yeah.
So Malvika, you want to get started with some tips and tricks of how important it is in the first place to introduce your puppy.
I think we'll have to talk about pups, right? They don't come into our house knowing that how to walk on a leash or even being familiar with a collar. It's a very unfamiliar thing to have something around your neck. So we've got to start from the basics, right? When the puppy comes in, we may have a puppy that hasn't reached all the sets of vaccinations, right? It may not have completed it. So in those instances, or anytime we get a new dog into the house, the first thing is we'll have to introduce the leash to the puppy. Hey, puppy, this is the leash, puppy. And it has to be a very positive association, very positive meeting. I've seen a lot of pet parents who have said, well, my puppy for 16 weeks wasn't vaccinated, and then when I took her for a walk, she just pulled all the way through. Well, yeah, of course. Imagine if you have never been introduced to something and you have to, expect professional behavior out of a dog. It's not going to happen. So the introduction has to be very thought out and done in a very positive fashion, right? And we can start off with, if the puppy is a nervous pup, or if it's a little anxious around leashes and collars, it has to be every time the pup comes to the leash, praise the pup, make it a very positive experience. Have the collar and leash on during the day. It also helps in the leash control around the house. So let it move around freely with the leash, very loose, never a tight leash, never tether the dog, never tether the pup, because it associates very painful things with the leash. So you've got to be a little mindful of how you interact with the pup with a leash, right?
Right.
It's also going to be a very enticing toy. Imagine a pup sees something dangling in front of it. The first thing it's going to do is lunge at it and bite and tug, and probably the behavior will continue all the entire walking session as well, right? You've seen far more than I have of that behavior. So introduction is key, right? And it has to be positive. And don't expect miracles the very first time you put a leash on a pup and you have it walk with you. It's not going to happen. It takes a lot of work. And unlike obedience training, this isn't like a sit down come. It's also a behavioral training, right? It's in the mind, and it has to come from a very positive, happy place for both people.
And leash is something that stays through the life, right, of the dog. And that is the only way you have control, or you're connected to your dog when you're outside. So it's just so important that you get that right. So many pet parents ask, my pup is away at the leash. So that's okay. Let them see. You have to be prepared with buying 2 or 3 leashes. Always buy a leash and keep it at home, because your puppy may not sleep in the night, may be bored and chew up the leash. And the other thing, you just put the leash on your puppy and let your puppy walk around with the leash hanging on the floor.
Exactly.
Play with it for a while, bite at it, don't pay any attention, ignore, and your puppy will be just fine, right? Your puppy just gets used.
Correct. Yeah. And the other thing that I've noticed a lot of people do, misbehaviors in a pup. What is the first thing we do? A lot of parents do. They'll pick the end of the leash and give it a tiny whack on the back. It's not. It satisfies our frustration, but it does not do anything for the pup. And it just makes life harder as it goes on. So introduction is key, right? And even in our training, that when we start off with puppy trainings, we make sure that, even before the pups can go outdoors, we are working with every single pup to learn how to walk indoors, how to walk with people of different sizes, with people who walk fast, with who walk slow. What do you do when you see distractions? You can start prepping for it indoors, and then we slowly progress into how we walk outdoors. But we can come more to that later.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, that's some tip from us on how you can introduce your puppy to a leash, right? So Malvika, what about a dog that's older and has been adopted and has never been on a leash or has never been really walked as such, right? We see a lot of anxiety issues with dogs that are adopted. They're not anxious when they're at home, but when they step out, they're really so anxious, right? Because they haven't walked on a leash before. So what is your advice to?
So when I was working with shelter dogs, right, they were all nervous. They've all come from a place of abuse, or they've come from a place of neglect, or they've never experienced walking ever before. And we've seen so many of those situations. One of the things we typically would do was, as I said, for puppies, but we'd continue to do the same thing, is we would have the pup, come close to us when we have a treat in our hand and the leash. And every time the dog would come sniff, we would praise the dog, we would reward it. So keep a very positive energy around it, very positive and interaction between the dog and the leash. We would never, have a leash on the dog and say, let's walk. When you keep walking, you will be all okay. It was never the case. It was a lot of rewarding. It was a lot of positive reinforcement to the dog. And the other thing we used to do was to create situations or create scenarios which would desensitize the dog to all its nervousness. Some dogs get nervous around vehicular movement. Some dogs would get nervous around people walking in hoodies. You never know what kind of place they've come from. So it was very important to socialize and just desensitize the dog with these things. So every time you would notice something that would trigger anxious behavior in the dog, you could try distracting it, or you could try kind of reinforcing that it's fine, it's not a big deal, and not kind of pull the dog through a scary situation or a situation that causes anxiety or nervousness.
Right.
So tough love in this case doesn't work. You're only going to make it harder for an adult dog. So we'd have to be very careful around what are the triggers that cause that nervousness and that anxiety.
And also the key is to be really patient, right? I mean, this is not going to turn around in a few days or even in a few weeks or sometimes few months for some dogs, right? So acceptance of the dog's situation, acceptance of the fact that the dog is going through some maybe anxiety or behavior issues, accepting that fact, being patient, working with the right people, working with professionals to fix it goes a long way, right? A few months of hard work and
exactly,
it goes a really long way.
Exactly. I mean, this is no different from obedience training. If it's as simple as you want your dog to know how to come to you, how to stay in a position, and how to perform those commands, it's still going to require the same amount, if not more, work to get the dog to have a positive walking experience. I mean, we all know that walking is one of the very many exercises one has to offer their dogs, right? And if it's not positive, then it's a very tough challenge. It's an uphill battle. So we have to make it a more positive experience.
Right, absolutely. Cool. So let's quickly move on. So just to update our audience, right? Malvika and I are unable to see the comments at this point. We've requested the team to just look at that in the back end. Sure. So Malvika, I think we're going to have, just to sort this out, right? We will take these questions on our phone. We will be texted. So sorry about that interruption. Let's move on to the next topic, which is choosing the correct leash, right? Or just not the leash. Let's talk about the leash first. Let's not jump the gun.
You start. Why don't you're the expert around different leashes that are available. I just know one. But
absolutely. So if it's a puppy, obviously, start with a small leash, start with a light leash, start with a leash that has a soft material to it, and which is not irritating the puppy too much, which does not have too many metal pieces in it, because the puppy's going to chew at it, and then that metal piece is going to make noises, which is going to distract the puppy or attract the puppy to chew at the leash. So find a nice light small leash for your puppy to just put on the collar or the harness and hang around. But other than that, there are quite a few leashes available, right? We have the retractable leash. Malvika, you've been in the US, so a lot of people in the US use retractable leashes. But can you share a few advantages, or maybe the reasons why they use retractable?
I'll tell you this. So where these are really most beneficial that I have seen is in these non-fenced yards. So imagine you're in a huge area. Your neighbor's separation from yours is not defined by a fence. In fact, there is no definition of a boundary here. And you can't let your dog off leash, right? You don't want the dog sauntering away into your neighbor's house at the end of the training session. So a retractable leash gives you that opportunity to still control your dog, but allow it a much larger radius to explore. Technically, it's backyard. but the backyard is not fenced, and the dog does not have a radar of boundaries yet, right? So those are instances where a retractable leash is wonderful, and you see somebody approaching, you immediately pull the dog back and you have control over the dog. This I have also seen benefit people who are just about introducing the dog to socializing, right? When they are in meeting a bunch of friends who have very, very well behaved dogs, not just openly into a dog park, but very well balanced, even keel kind of dogs. And they're slowly introducing their pup to this behavior. It helps control the dog. You allow the dog to go a little farther, to play a little more with the other, and pull it back when you see things go out of hand. This is another advantage of having a retractable leash. But frankly, beyond this, I don't see the use case anywhere else. Right? You know more.
Yeah. Do you see a use case in India? I mean, you've been with dogs in the US. You're now in India and with your dog. Would you ever use a retractable leash on your dog in India?
Never. I can very confidently say never.
Yes.
I mean, the number of accidents we've seen, we can control our animal, but we cannot control the environment around you, right? It's just impossible to do that. You're just opening your dog up to a pack of wolves. That's basically it here. Because we are in a denser area. We are living in urban areas where you don't have that luxury of space. And that's where we have to be very mindful. The retractable leash only gives the benefit of distance, but very rarely does it give the dog any other positive experience. And that's just unavailable in India at the moment.
Exactly, right. So a retractable leash is just basically used on a dog that is very well behaved, that has a good recall and will come back to you when called, used in large open spaces where, there is no fear of strays, there's no fear of vehicle. Sorry, Malvika, my connection's acting up today.
Yes,
rainy day in Bangalore.
I lost you for a bit, but that's all right. I think what you were saying was you want to have space, right? And you should be able to get the dog come back to you.
Yes, that's very important, right? More than having space, your dog comes back to you when called. That's how obedient your dog needs to be on a retractable leash, because your dog can walk away from you. You can stop your dog from walking away further, but can you bring your dog back if your dog doesn't have a good recall? You cannot, right? Again, you cannot stop, wires hanging from electricity poles. You cannot, you see a lot of footpaths that are broken. You see a lot of footpaths that have garbage on it.
Glass
you have, and all of that, right? So we don't have that environment or that ecosystem to really use a retractable leash. So that's something that we don't recommend most pet parents to use. Again, a normal round leash, right? Now you get those leashes which are round, or you get flat leash which are really soft material. So remember that a leash is actually connecting you to the dog. So the leash needs to be comfortable on your hands. Right? You cannot be uncomfortable.
You could lose control. If it gets uncomfortable.
Right. If it hurts your hand, you have no control over your dog. So definitely find one which has a really comfortable handle. Plus, the leash needs to be comfortable, because just grabbing the handle is not enough sometimes. You need to grab the whole leash. Again, we have something called a half and half leash, which is, the side that you hook on to the dog's collar is made of chain, and then half of the leash, the remaining half, is made of cloth or fiber or any fabric, right? And this leash is, again, it is not to be used as a regular leash. It is a training aid for dogs that have the habit of turning around, grabbing their leash in the mouth and tugging at it.
They are play toy.
In the middle of a walk, in the middle of the road, and they're not going to let go, and neither can you let go because you're outside with your dog, right? So half and half leash is something that corrects that behavior, but you must look at correcting that behavior and shifting to a normal leash, and not carrying on with that.
Yes.
So that's one of the leashes that we've worked with.
Good
You
point.
have a
Yeah.
full chain leash, right? Which is completely made of chain. Uh, Frankly, it's not comfortable for the human who's handling the dog, not comfortable for the dog either. It's
Yeah.
really heavy. It makes a lot of noise. It can hit the dog's skin
I've seen
constantly.
bruised animals with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, Usually, I've seen people's dogs being tied up with that, right? The dogs that are really
Yeah.
strong and who are not socialized that well, they're being tied up with those chains. Um,
Yeah.
we usually use in our boarding centers and things like that. We usually use this to tie large size dogs up when
Yeah.
they are bathing them, right? And they're immediately unleashed again. So this leash is actually of no use during a walk. Absolutely of no use. Do
Yes.
not use this. I mean, you'll
Yeah.
be really you'll be really foolish to use this because it's going to hurt your hand, right? And it's so heavy. It just hangs on the dog's collar. If your dog is not comfortable, your dog is not going to enjoy the walk. Neither are you going to enjoy the walk. It's no fun.
Yeah.
A walk
Yeah.
is supposed to be fun and pleasant and something that you enjoy with your dog. So make sure
Yes.
it's
Exactly.
good. And then we have
Yeah.
something called a slip leash. Basically, this leash is used without a collar or a harness. It's just slipped onto the dog's neck, and when you pull it, it just becomes like a choke collar.
Yeah.
Again, this leash is not to be used by an average person.
Absolutely
Experts,
not.
certified trainers, dog handlers, people who work with rescues, people
Yeah.
who work in shelters. I've heard from Anand that they use it in relocations as well because they're meeting new dogs who they have never met
Yes.
before, right? And
Right.
it has to be used very carefully because you can hurt the dog with it.
Yes.
So,
Very easily.
slip leash is something that an average person should never use. So these are
Absolutely.
some of the leashes, right, that are available in the market and people kind of and easily available for purchase as well. So that's why I
Mhm.
thought I'll just touch upon these leashes. So always look at working with your dog to reach a stage where you're able to use a normal leash to walk your dog,
Yeah.
right? And the rest of
Normal
it,
leash and not off leash.
not off leash, never off
Yeah.
leash. Doesn't matter how good your dog is.
Yeah. There's
Uh,
no time to show off here.
Absolutely, right? No
Yeah.
time to show off. And even if you want to show off, you have no control on the environment, right? There could be a new pack of dogs in your area that don't know your dog
Yeah.
and could attack your dog. There could be people who are not comfortable with
Exactly.
dogs and understand that your dog is trained and very calm. They could just get intimidated by the presence of the dog there, right?
Yeah.
So let's not make anybody uncomfortable or put our dogs in danger. Never unleash your dogs, please.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, I've spoken quite a bit, Malvika. So, do you want to add to that?
No, that's about it. Interestingly, one thing about the slip leash is quite a few pet parents that I'm handling right now have asked me about it because I understand that there are some books and some YouTube tutorials that say, well, a slip leash will help you with leash walking and will keep it a more positive experience for the dog. Let's just walk the dog on a slip leash. But I have not seen a single instance where a slip leash has helped correct it has not worked. The only times I've used slip leash trying to get the dogs to walk into an unknown area. We wanted to have the better control because what the slip leash does is it's right behind the ears, under the jawline. That's where they're typically placed, and it's very easy for you to control the movement of the dog when it's that close. But it also is a choking hazard. That's just something you have to be comfortable with, and you have to be able to control the dog. If you're not comfortable handling a dog and you don't, please don't take on a slip leash. There's a particular reason it's just slipped on, because it's slipped on to get control of a dog that is typically out of control, and it's slipped off as soon as you can get a collar and leash on the dog. It's not a permanent solution. It's not something that you want to take lightly. So just be very careful about using a slip leash.
Right.
So
Malvika, sorry, my connection. I've been in and out because of my connection, but I heard you, right? You were talking about
yeah,
the slip leash. So yes, that's very important, right?
correct,
And because it's so easily available, it's so important to educate people that it's not for the average person, right?
correct.
It's
It's
just
not.
so easily available these days in the market to purchase.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just quickly going to take a question. So, Malvika, I
Okay.
have the questions sent to me, and I'll read it out. Right.
All right. Perfect.
Preeti Singh Roy is asking, what should be the size of the leash for a lab
Hmm.
puppy who's 3 months old?
Hmm.
Do
Go for
you want
it.
to take that? Okay,
No, go for it.
so Preeti, reach out to any store that sells leashes and ask them a leash for a puppy. Do not buy the adult leash, which are big in size. But
Yeah.
definitely, because it's a lab puppies can be quite hyper. Do buy a leash that is made of soft material, soft on your
Material. Yeah.
hand, round and not flat, preferably, because then it's just easier for you to hold. And again, make sure you buy more than one, because a lab puppy will definitely chew into your
True.
leash.
It's a chewing hazard.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah, don't buy those thin, flat, really tiny ones which are made for small breeds. Buy a medium-sized leash, right?
Yeah.
Not an adult leash. Just buy a medium-sized leash. So, hope that answered your question.
Yeah,
If you
and
have,
also depends on the height of the individual, right? If you have a 6-footer standing there walking the pup, you will need to have a longer leash.
very
But
good
the
point.
way you walk and handle the leash is important. It's less so the length of the leash, but more on where do you position your hands and how do you control the tension in the leash. So that's important. You could walk a pup with a 10-foot long leash, but you've got to be very careful about how much distance and space you give the pup. Right? We'd have to make sure the pup is still walking right next to us, not sauntering away because it has a 10-foot long leash. I think, but you're right. A lab is going to be an extremely curious dog, like the hounds, like the beagles. It wants to explore, it wants to dart after anything that moves, and bring you back anything he finds. So it's going to be, it requires patience, but it requires the right leash. The wrong leash can just ruin the whole walking experience.
Absolutely. That's a
Yeah.
very important point, Malvika. Thanks for putting that out.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we've spoken about leashes, right? So now leash is attached to a collar and a harness. So just quickly, let's
Mhm.
touch upon, what
Yeah.
kind of collars or harnesses can be used on dogs. So basically, what we have experienced is that whether your dog is on a collar or a harness is based on the personality of your dog and the
Mm.
behavior of the dog, right?
Yeah. Breed, size, everything.
Majorly, neither both of them have pros and both of them have cons. So that's why it's absolutely dependent on how your dog is during a walk.
Yeah.
Is your dog a puller? Is your dog jumpy? Is your dog calm and walks very nicely? A lot of those, right?
Yeah.
Again, it also depends on the breed that you're walking. So collars mainly, as trainers, during the training time, we definitely use only collars, right? We prefer a normal
Mm.
collar or a
Yeah.
martingale collar
Yes.
during training to train your dog to walk on a leash well. But if
Yeah.
your dog is well trained, that doesn't pull and really enjoys the walk, is quite calm, happy during the walk, not
Yeah.
lunging at people, not lunging at other dogs,
Not easily
not
distracted. Yeah.
not distracted, not darting at things, right?
Yeah.
Then a harness is great, right? Because there's nothing on the dog's neck.
Yeah.
So again, a collar or a harness is absolutely dependent on the behavior of the dog during the walk and the
Yes.
personality of the dog.
Yeah.
Uh, it is not that a harness is going to correct anything or a collar is going to make anything worse. Both has, it just depends on how you're using it, when you're using it. If you are training your dog on leash walking, please shift to a collar. It's just just a preferable
Harness
accessory.
is always harder.
To train them. Yeah, harness can do it because they have you have no control on them because their body is completely loose and out there to jump around and all of that, right? So, but again, once your dog is trained, if you like your dog to be on harness, absolutely go for it. So, you can, again, if you're using a trainer or if any professional, definitely reach out to them for advice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and get started with leash training if your dog is already not leash trained.
Yes.
Okay, so with that, let's move on to the topic of leash training itself, right? Leash training your puppy.
Yes.
So, what is the
So
first thing you do with your pet parent?
well, to be honest with
What's the
you,
first
the
thing you
very
advise them to?
first session where we're just starting off training the dog, we just don't give them an option where we say, listen, time to start practicing your walk, right? It's just very important for the puppy. And typically, let me just preface that with the pups that typically come to us at anywhere between 3 months to about 8 months of age that we've managed. But we recommend the same sort of steps for both, because they might have walked on a leash before, but they're walking on the leash with you, with the handler, the very first time. So we'll have to treat it like we're walking from scratch, like we're just about starting with them. One of the first things that we do in these puppy training sessions is actually two things that I do. I say something about leash control to the parents. What I do tell them is, have the pup on its collar and leash and let it just do its thing, right? It walks around in the house, of course, making sure it doesn't get stuck somewhere under a table or under the leg of it. You there? Anyway, I'll keep continuing. So just making sure there's leash control that you have on the pup. So the pup gets used to having a collar and a leash around it. It's doing its own thing. Nobody's holding on to the other end of the leash. But the pup just gets used to having something around its neck, and it's walking around. The other thing that we do is to make sure the pet parents spend some time walking the dog indoors, because most cases these dogs have not finished their entire set of vaccinations. So what we do is we have the pet parents hold on to the leash indoors, have a loose leash, practice loose leash walking, start training the pet parents on how to get the dog to focus on them rather than play with the leash or tug at the leash or kind of pounce up and down, because they're enjoying this whole experience of walking with the pet parent. In those instances, we kind of start introducing pet parents on a dog. It's a lot of times it's very different from how pet parents envision walking a dog to be. They think the dog will just be ready to walk beautifully by their side. Very rarely do they, and that's why we actually ask them to record themselves while watching the pup, right? So they can see their body language, they can see how they react to the pup's behavior. In their heads, they're thinking they're doing the right thing, but they're actually introducing a lot of wrong behaviors. So in leash training, one of the first things we notice, pups, what they typically do, they want to tug at the leash, right? It's a fantastic thing. There's something dangling from the pet parent's hand. Of course, they want to tug and they want to pull, but there's a certain way you have to correct that. And tugging back and telling the dog, hey, drop it, a million times will not help, because you're only tugging with the pup and you're just going to encourage that behavior, right? So in leash training, we talk about different steps on how do you get the pup to stop that behavior. What do you encourage the pup to do instead? If the pup is walking straight ahead or walking right beside you or starts making eye contact with you, you positively reinforce that. You encourage that kind of behavior. Anytime the pup kind of pulls at you, darts at you, how do you correct it? These are things that can be taught even indoors, right? So that's what we do before all the vaccinations are done. You don't have to wait for vaccinations to be completed to start introducing the leash to the pup. The training actually happens well before that.
In fact, it's easier, right? When you start indoors,
exactly.
It's easier because you tend to learn how to manage your dog on a leash,
Yeah,
even before you go out. So the situation
exactly.
becomes a little more manageable, a little better
Correct.
when it's time to take your dog
Exactly.
out.
And you're setting expectations with the dog, right? You're telling the dog, this is what I like. So when it goes out for a walk, it's very easy to quickly remind the dog, hey, this is what I wanted you to do. What are you doing
Yeah,
now? So the dog will very quickly circle back, and there are connections the dog will make on what's a good acceptable behavior while going on a walk. And I think the same can be done even if you get an adult dog into the house, right? We'd always recommend practicing indoors first. Just get the dog used to walking with you. He or she might have walked with another person before, but it's always recommended you start walking with the dog indoors first, so you control the environment, you control um, the distractions, you teach the dog the proper, and then you start going outside.
yeah. In
Right, so
fact, you create distractions at home, right? When you're doing leash walking, first you
yes,
practice out, then you create distractions. And
yes,
there's one thing that I want to point out, right? When you're practicing leash walking, it has to be with more than one person at home. That is because
yes,
you don't
yes,
want to be the only one who's walking your dog. Because if you're not there, then your family members don't know what to do, how to take the dog out. The dog is
yeah,
not behaving
yeah,
with them. You're going to be stuck in a mess. So we
correct.
always encourage either all of the family members,
Hmm.
if they're able
Yeah,
to, otherwise at least more than one, two, three, to start walking their
yeah.
dogs on leash inside the house.
You know that, right? Most of our questions around leash training has been, my dog likes to walk fast, but my father can't walk that fast, so leash walking is turning into a very painful exercise. That's where leash training helps. That's where introducing the pup to walking with different members of the family indoors help, because the pup then begins to understand how to walk with every single individual. You can even have your kids practice it. Just because they're young doesn't mean that they shouldn't be walking the dog. Um, right? There may be,
Very
I mean, I have situations where I'm unloading stuff from the car and I have my kids just, hey, can you hold my dog first for a sec? So my dog knows what good leash behavior is. So she's not just darting away somewhere, but she knows the kids are in control, but she still knows what good behavior is, right? So
right.
it's
Also,
very
the
interesting.
kids learn to also the kids learn to be patient, and they learn to keep the
Absolutely,
dog secure, right?
yeah.
It builds a bond between the kid and the dog.
Totally.
And
Big builder
we
of
as
bond.
we as kids have done all of it, right? We have fed our
Yes,
dogs, we've bathed our dogs, we've walked our dogs. We've
cleaned up
done all
after
sorts
them.
of things. Yeah, all sorts of things apart from playing with them or cuddling with them, right? And that's
Yeah.
what has taught us so much as human beings, as well as taught us so much about the dogs. Because
Yes.
a lot of dogs go through a lot of stress because of the kids in the house, because they always want to play with the dog. The dog is sleeping and the kid is pulling the dog's ear and wants the dog to wake up and
There's no
play. So
space. Yeah.
yes, so engaging your kids with the daily routine of the dog, sharing responsibilities with your kids helps
Yeah.
a lot with the bond, and
Absolutely.
they understand the dogs.
Absolutely. And that's what we do even in our online trainings, right? We just make sure that every single member of the house is involved, not just in obedience training, not just getting the dog to sit down, come, but it's also with walking.
Yeah,
Because it's critical that the training happens with every person in the household.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
you won't believe, some of the kids in the puppy trainings that I've done, they've been more observant about the dog than their parents.
Correct. Correct.
When we ask them, okay, what did you observe about your dog this week? Oh, they come out with such good answers, right? This is what he did during the
Yeah.
walk.
And solutions, you know, yeah, and solutions. I'm just amazed. Some of the younger ones, we shouldn't really discount them, because a lot of times they tell their parents, this is what you're doing. When this happened, this was your reaction. You shouldn't be doing that. Remember what ma'am said, and they go into that mode, which is
Yeah,
great, because theirs is a very unfiltered opinion, right? And
absolutely.
it's very important to involve all the members in the family during training. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have one question from Merson Correa.
Okay.
How to deal with a pup that's scared of leash, pulls
Mm.
backwards, is offering food to bring him towards oneself the right thing to do.
Mm.
Now, it's important to it's important for us to know what breed you're talking about, what's the age of the dog, good, happy. Can you still hear me, Malvika? Because I think I lost
Now
my
I can.
connection again.
Yeah, now I can. Yeah.
Okay. So I was just asking to, some questions about what dog do you have? What is the personality of your dog in
Yes.
general, right? So it's very important for us to know those things to understand why your dog is pulling back on the leash, right? Maybe you're
Yeah.
walking towards something that your dog doesn't like. Maybe you're walking into a space which you don't realize is not safe, or maybe there are strays there, but your dog can sense it. Maybe there are so many things. Maybe your dog is
A
absolutely
lot
not
of
used to
factors.
walking on leash at all. So directly taking your dog on a long walk is not the solution. Amstaff 2.5 months old,
Definitely
right?
not
So
in
it's
the
still a
first.
puppy. You can still mold your dog. And Malvika, I think my connection is choppy. Do you want to take that question? Because I don't want any interruptions
Sure.
for the audience.
Did you say the dog was 2.5 months old?
2.5 months old Amstaff, American Stafford
Amstaff.
Shire.
Okay. Yeah. So this is a terrier, right? Basically, this is a dog that is an independent animal. So terriers typically were bred to go running after rats and to find things that are stuck in haystacks, and to keep farms clean and all of that. Now you're asking that dog to walk on a leash, so of course the dog is going to have to be introduced to the leash correctly. So I'll say when he's still that young, it is a very easy task to help get over that behavior, but you've got to be very careful. Now, remember, the staff is going to be a tinier dog. He's not going to be a big dog at 2.5 months. So, first of all, has to be careful about how they approach the dog. Um, a lot of times, it's a tiny little thing that gets intimidated with a big person walking up front to the dog, and bending over, trying something in the collar and on the neck. It is an intimidating experience. So I'll say first, figure out how you want to approach your dog. Right? Typically, what we do, we get down to the level of the dog, show him the leash, kind of have a positive association. Every time the dog comes and sniffs the leash, say good boy or good girl and give him that leash. Let him have a positive association. Every time he comes close to it, it's a good thing. Don't be afraid. Don't do it from a 6 foot height. Come down to the dog's level. Let have that interaction with the dog. If it's not a nippy biting hyper pup, you could try a gentle game of tug, just to get him excited about the leash, to make him realize that he's not going to be in a dangerous situation. This is the if low energy sort of dog. After that, I would say if these issues happen during a walk, I think at 2.5 months you wouldn't have started walking your dog. But anyway, if it happens when the collar and leashes are on and you're walking with him, I will say you have to make sure you do this in a very positive area first. Probably it has to be in your compound or in your terrace where the dog is very comfortable with the surroundings, right? You
Right.
can't
You
take it.
don't even have to really step outdoors at once,
No.
right? And
Yeah,
also
not
just
at all.
to add to that, right, Malvika, sorry for the interruption, but
No,
I
no,
just wanted to add saying, initially, in the initial days, don't try to control your dog on the leash, right? Let your dog explore while being on the leash. Let your dog sniff around. Let your dog go
yeah,
in the direction it wants to go, right? Don't try to control your dog on day one. You have to first get your dog to be comfortable on that leash and also be comfortable going outside. So the dog hasn't stepped out, Malvika, because it's a 2.5-month-old puppy. So the
okay,
puppy hasn't stepped
yeah,
out yet.
just as much.
So he's just trying to, introduce that to the dog. So it's basically allowing the
Yeah,
dog to be comfortable, right? So just
yeah,
be hold the leash at one end and let your dog be on the other end of the leash. Let your dog do its thing. Let your dog get used to walk towards the direction it wants to go, sniff things around, and during all this time, talk to your dog, say, oh, what a good boy, or what a good girl.
yes.
Yes, oh, did you
Every time
sniff?
he
You
does
want
something nice.
to? just keep talking to your dog, right? So that your dog is not paying attention to the leash and is rather paying attention to you. So next time you walk
Yeah.
a step further, like Malvika was saying, you walk in the compound or you walk in the corridor of your apartment if you're living in an apartment, then move on to just the stairs. Go down the stairs, come back up and go into the house, right? Just get them used to going a step further and then a step further, right? So again, take it slow, and every time you're moving around with your dog, talk to your dog, be positive about it. Don't try to be in
Yeah.
control from day one, right? Don't hold the leash too tight from day one, right? That will
Yeah.
come, but your dog has to feel comfortable first. So that
Correct.
pulling, usually dogs resist when you pull them, right? So there is a
Yeah.
technique used to do that, to make those corrections. But again, you have we would recommend that you involve an expert in doing that. But
Yeah.
since your dog is 2.5 months old, it's just about your dog getting
It's the
used to the leash.
novelty, it's the unknowns, right? You don't know what's going to happen. You might have very well used the leash to take him to the vet, and he's now suddenly associated the leash to be something that takes him to
Yes,
a vet. So you have to have
correct.
positive associations with it. In fact, one of the things I also used to do with some of the very, very nervous, anxious dogs, shelter dogs, used to be just have a leash dangling. Like they collar a leash, they're in the dog park, they're just running around. There's no dog parks here. Please don't take it to a dog park. But what we would allow was the dog to just run around with the leash. So it knows the leash really doesn't bother. It doesn't stop me from doing my thing. It doesn't stop me from going saying hello to my friend. It doesn't stop me from going drinking water. I can actually sleep on a leash. All of those things. Again, it's a behavioral change you're introducing to the dog. So while indoors, that's also something you could do. But every time you see, for starters, every time you see the pup even take a step towards the leash or do something you want him to do, praise the dog amply, profusely, shower him with bite-sized treats, all of that. But make sure it's a very positive engagement. Yeah.
Yes, that's those are really good points, right? I hope we've answered your question, Merson, and do give us feedback on how your dog is doing after that. Ankit Chakrabarti has a few questions. How to
Oh,
attach
great.
or detach to my puppy with him being calm? He tends to play with the leash and bite it. We just covered that, right? But Malvika, a quickly on that, right? So put the leash, hook the leash on, and then start playing ball with your puppy, right? Distract your puppy with other things. And then, when your puppy is not looking, is busy with the ball, pick up the leash in your hand. Again, don't strain the leash. Just let it hang. Just hold the other end and just say, let's go. Come on, let's go. Let's go for a walk, right? Your puppy's in a happy mood and your puppy's ready to go for a walk.
Hmm.
The other thing is, right, if your puppy is really hyper, you don't want to talk to your puppy at that point because you're just going to enhance that hyperactivity. At this stage, training your dog is really important because all we
Yeah.
do in our puppy trainings, hyper dogs, is sit down and I will leash you and we'll go for a walk, right?
Yes.
Or,
Yeah.
if the dog is jumpy, even in a sit position, go down, wait, I'm going to leash you now and then we'll start the walk, right? So
Yeah.
basic obedience can be used in many different ways to solve
Correct.
so many different problems, right?
Yeah.
uh, we don't take training that seriously even today, but trust me, just basic 4 5 commands, right? It goes a long way in solving a lot of problems, because when you say a command to your dog understands or knows exactly what you're expecting your dog to
Yeah.
do, and your dog is going to do that and get rewarded for it, right? But if you haven't trained your dog, you're gonna say things to your dog that your dog is not going to understand. It's going to be gibberish,
Correct.
right? It's like that
Yeah.
new app that you have. I think it's on Instagram, right? It shows you some gibberish, and then you have to guess the name of the movie or name of the
Right.
place. That's
You're talking
exactly
to a
what happens to your
social
dog.
media delivery. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And your dog is like, "What are you saying? I don't know what you want me to do." But when you say sit, and your dog knows the sit command, your dog knows exactly what to do,
Yeah.
right? So help your dog understand you better, and good behavior comes with it.
Yeah. And the other thing to add,
quickly,
if the
Malvika,
dog.
did I go?
No, you finished your thought. You finished your line of thought.
Oh,
That's we got everything you say. I was just adding on to it, which is if you have a pup that's super excited about having a leash on it, right? You do not step out of the house until the dog actually calm. You control the walk, the dog doesn't. If the dog charges out of the door, half the walk is wasted because you're going to spend the rest of the time trying to get control of the situation. So before you go out and have a hyper dog on your leash, on the other end of the leash, we could play mental games. And as you said rightly, obedience training right before a walk is wonderful because you've let the dog think. You've allowed it to exercise a different part of its body, which is its mind. And then you could play a game of fetch, or you could have some sort of basic fun stuff that you play at home, and then take the dog out for a walk, because then you have a dog that's less excitable, that has actually vented
Lesser
out some of its energy. Yes, the energy levels are lower and much easier for you to control. Right, so there are different ways to do it, but it's high energy dogs are wonderful to train, but they're also a lot of work. So it's keep at it, consistency, and keep at it. Don't give up, don't give in.
There's one more question from Ankit asking, how to teach my puppy to heel? He pulls forward. Oh, that's a training question. Teaching a puppy to heel is completely training. So, you may want to discuss this with a trainer. We will not be able to explain it on a live session, but we are happy to help you.
It requires a relationship. It requires the puppy to start learning things. If the puppy doesn't know how to learn things, it will not respond to heel, which is why training is important. Training will teach that, the trainer pet sort of relationship. And it's very important for the dog to even pick up the concept of heel, because it's very hard to train a dog to heel if he or she's not introduced to the concept of training.
Yeah, absolutely. He has a third question, and the last one, which is, his dog is a 4-month-old Rottweiler, male puppy. So his last question is, how do I avoid my puppy from putting stuff in his mouth from the ground while on walk? He's very quick to do that. So again, this is all about leash control, right? Your puppy is definitely going to do that, right? That's what puppies do. They're playful and they don't really think before doing things.
Yeah.
And this is where the handler's leash control comes into picture, right?
Yeah.
So we wanted to quickly also cover about, the handler's understanding of the dog, the handler's understanding of leash control, how well does the handler know the dog? Malvika, am I still there?
Yes, you're still there. We can still hear you. You're on.
Can you all still see me? If somebody can just ping me and tell me if you can still see me.
Yeah.
Am I there, Malvika? I'm not sure if I'm to the wall or I'm still online.
I just sent you a message. You're there.
Okay, great. Sorry. So so you need to know your puppy well. You need to observe your puppy. By now you know that your puppy picks up things in a jiffy on a walk. So you have to be really observant about where you're walking and what's coming during the walk. If you see that there's something that's fallen around, a plastic packet, a banana peel, a rotten tomato, quickly get your puppy on a short leash, cross that place, and then again let your puppy, be on a relaxed leash. So it's all about how you handle your dog during the walk, and not so much about the dog's behavior at this age. Your dog is going to get used to it gradually.
Yeah.
Right. You have to just right now avoid your dog from picking things up from the road. The other thing we do in training is, we actually do we try and take the training outdoors during a walk. Get your puppy to sit.
That's what I want to say.
10 steps. Get your puppy to sit. Again, walk 10 steps. Get your puppy to sit. So that way, your puppy is not really concentrating on what's on the ground and not picking things up. Rather, you're making it fun for your puppy. So your puppy is concentrating more on you, is focused more on you, and is having fun with you during the walk, right? So remember that the walk is between you and your puppy. You all have to enjoy it together. It can't be that you're listening to music and your puppy is doing his own thing, right? It has to be between you two, just like, just like you would walk with your friend, have a chit chat with your friend, right? It's just like that. So it has to be a good bond between you two, and you, as a handler, have to be more observant and avoid those situations, because now that your puppy has started doing it, it will become a habit, right? Maybe he's not doing it because he wants to do it. It's just become a habit, right? He just feels that because you react, you must be reacting, saying, no, don't pick it up. What are you doing? And that is what your puppy is looking forward to. Oh, he's talking to me when I pick things up from the road. Yeah. Wow, he talks to me. He comes so close to my face and he talks to me. He touches me, right? That's what your puppy is thinking. So try and avoid. In this case, avoiding such situations is the best thing to do.
I mean, you brought up a very good point, because pups or dogs in general know when the handler's distracted. They can easily tell from your walk, the way you hold your leash, when you're on your phone, or when you're, even on a call, or if you're even listening to a podcast, the dog knows very well you're not paying attention. So I will say, when you have a pup, especially when you're correcting behaviors right now, please leave your electronic gadgets behind. Focus on the dog. Because the dog will very quickly know that you're not paying attention, and before you know it, something's in his mouth. And what happens, as Antaleena said, you now have the dog being thrilled that it has your attention. You have a dog that's going to keep doing this over and over, because it knows you're distracted, and now you're giving the attention it desires and it craves sometimes. So very important to pay attention to the dog. Another thing is, if you do see a distraction coming up, like a rotten tomato or a plastic cover, or even a thrown shoe, who knows, you just got to make sure that you introduce some distraction. Like when I'm walking with my dog and I spot something that I know is going to distract her, very quickly it's like, hey, focus, look at me, let's go sit, let's cross, practice some road crossing, practice some of those. So you quickly turn that into a training exercise, and before you know it, the dog doesn't even realize that there was something on the ground, and you're back to your walk. This also helps the dog pay attention to you on the walk, because what you have to introduce is a little randomness in your walk. As Antaleena said, you walk, suddenly you stop, you ask the dog to go back, you take a few paces back, come back again. So you're basically controlling the walk, which means you're going to have the dog keep looking at you, wondering, what are you going to do next with me? Which means the leash is going to be loose. You're going to have a dog focused on you, which means the dog has fewer opportunities to pick stuff up from the ground. So yeah, as you said, introduce training outdoors. It's always the best remedy for these mischievous, precocious at walk pups.
Engage with your dog, right? Don't let it be like in silos, like your dog is walking, doing something, and only when your dog is doing something wrong, you're engaging with your dog by saying, no, don't do that. Right? Your dog is going to do that just so that you engage with your dog, with him, right? So, make sure you're constantly engaging with your dog and focusing on your dog and the surroundings that you're walking in. Nimesh is asking, can a husky be off leash? Nimesh, no dog can be off leash, irrespective of breed, age, behavior, handler. No dog can be off leash, right? Unless you're in a place where it is fenced or there's a compound and there is nobody else around that can intimidate the dog, or who gets scared of dogs, in a safe place. Like, if you're going to, these days you have these small resorts where you're the only one who will be there with your dog and your family, right? So if you're traveling to such places, make sure you check the place out, make sure there's no stray hiding somewhere, there are no cats or other things that can intimidate your dog or bring out a bad behavior in your dog, and then let the dog off leash, but never in public. Right?
And you can't. A dog is, I mean, a dog's an animal, it's not a human. There will be distractions. There will be that one unfortunate movement when it spots a squirrel across the street and darts after it. You never know what's going to happen. Why would you put your dog in that situation, right? And you have to remember, huskies, they are independent dogs. They are bred to pull. I mean, they're bred to pull sleds. Why would you take a husky off a leash? They love to be on a leash, and they love to go for those long walks. Let's not even risk it. Let's not do
And
that.
once they start running, you really can't catch up.
Absolutely not. They're gone. Goodbye. Unless
All right.
you're really good with recall, but let's not go there.
Girish is asking, how can I learn to be a dog training professional? Maybe that's what he's asking. Girish, you can get in touch with Anvis offline, and we can get in touch with you and discuss that. Is there any institute in Pune who teach dog training? I'm sure there is. Dogspot can guide you, to any institute that teaches dog training in Pune. I'm sorry, we are based out of Bangalore, and that's why I'm not able to answer that question. Okay, so Malvika, one very important thing and a last thought around dealing with leash pulling, right? I know we are going a bit over, but I think this is very important because we are dealing with a lot of such issues, right? And it's a very common issue across. Did I drop off again?
No, you're here.
Can you still hear me? I'm sorry about this. Okay. So dealing with leash pulling, right? Again, it's all about being patient with your dog, training your dog to walk on a leash. Don't expect your dog to start behaving in a day or two. If your dog has learned to pull on a leash already, then it's going to take a while to reverse that. The idea is, again, to tire your dog out before the walk, right? Dissipate all that excess energy in your dog by playing a game. A mental stimulation game would be the best thing to do, because a dog gets tired faster when you're playing games that they have to use their minds for, rather than a physical game indoors, because anyways they're going to get their physical activity outside on the walk, right? So figure out games that you can play for like 20 minutes, 15 minutes indoors, and constantly play with them, so that their energies are down and the pulling becomes lesser. It becomes more manageable for you, because when it becomes unmanageable for the handler to handle the dog when it's pulling, tempers soar sometimes, right? Patience. You tend to yell at the dog, you tend to drag the dog, right? And that's not the way to handle or correct the pulling behavior of a dog. It's not going to, for sure, right? So please do try and drain some of the energy of the dog before you go out on a walk. Create a routine. Please create a routine so that you take your dog out, whether your dog is asking to go out or not. Don't wait for your dog to really come at your feet and say, okay, I can't hold my bladder anymore, let's go out. Because your dog then gets used to pulling you or darting out the door, right? And that becomes a habit. Whether he really wants to go relieve himself or not, he's going to pull you out of the door, because that's what he's been doing all the time. So maintain a routine. Walking time should not be missed, should not be delayed.
Come rain, come shine.
Yes, absolutely right. And it has to be the same for the rest of the life. You have to maintain. I mean, if you have a pet, there are some commitments that you have to stick to, right? And walking is one of them. Taking them outdoors is one of them. You just want to add quickly to some more tips on how you can dissipate that excess energy when a dog is pulling, right? Even during a walk, for example.
Absolutely. So some of the things that we can do is, as Antaleena said, mental games, obedience training right before a walk. So the dog also starts responding to the training, because he knows good things are waiting after the training or after that mental game. But after that, it has to be around, once you are out of the door, or when you're at the door, make sure you're the first one stepping out, because you will ensure that the dog listens and remembers that for the rest of the walk. If you think the dog's going to pull you through the walk, I would recommend walk indoors again. Walk a couple of rounds indoors, and let the dog get used to being by your side, and then step outdoors. If the dog pulls again, go back in, repeat the same thing, and go out again. Structure, as Antaleena said, absolutely vital, most important. If you give up on the structure, which is the timing, the duration of the walk, it's going to be very hard to keep the dog controlled. It's going to be uncontrollable, unbridled energy there. So during the walk, make sure you do introduce some training. Make sure, there are different things you could do on the walk. You could get the dog to stay, you could get the dog to heel, you could teach the dog how to cross the road, you could teach the dog not to get off a footpath, you could do multiple things. You could also help introduce this, a lot of mental games too with the dog while you're on a walk. So different things that can be done to keep the dog engaged during the walk, because the pulling really happens because nothing interesting is happening around the handler. There are more interesting stuff lying around or happening on the footpath. So you have to make yourself more interesting. You will do that not when you're angry, not when you're yelling at the dog, not when you're distracted. You can only stop the leash pulling when you are engaged with the dog, when you are in a very calm state of mind. And structure and routine will bring that into an individual. It brings in discipline even within the individual, right? Once you have that calmness and once you have that stable state of mind, the leash pulling will reduce. And I'll strongly recommend, initially, if you think the dog's pulling, have someone else take a video of you walking the dog. It will give you a lot of insights about how you walk the dog. What do you do with the leash? Are you always used to having a tight leash, or have you ever walked with a loose leash on the dog? Because the dog might have just gotten used to pulling you. That's all he knows, how to walk. So I'll recommend taking a video of yourself while walking, and then you'll begin to notice all the different things you do right and wrong, which you could consciously work on the subsequent times you take out the dog for a walk.
Yeah, and the final point I want to make there is, right, maybe your dog is pulling because your dog is too distracted by other people, by kids, by other dogs. So sometimes we recommend people not to take their dogs out for a walk when people are on their morning walks, because your dog may be an over-friendly dog and is overjoyed to see humans, right? And is always pulling to go at somebody or the other, right? So choose a time of day when it's much calmer outside, distractions are much lesser for your dog, and then try your walks, right? And follow these things, some of the tips that we've given you. Try and follow that, because if you're thinking of bonding with your dog, training with your dog, teaching your dog something during a walk, it has to be at a time when it's calm outside, right? If it means after your dinner, when there are less people outside, early morning, at 11 when people are doing their office work and everybody's inside their homes, busy working from home, and you can get out with your dog and have some fun during that time, right? So identify times when it's just easier to handle your dog.
Correct.
All right. I don't see any more questions, Malvika.
Okay.
So I think we can.
I think we covered most of the important things, right?
Yes, we've touched upon most of the important stuff that we wanted to share. Please do feel free to get in touch with us. We're available to have any offline conversations that you all would like. And I hope you'll enjoyed the session and gained some knowledge or tips and tricks.
Yeah, and I think Anvis also has a leash walking course, right?
Yes, Anvis does have a course.
If more questions, if you want to have a quick look through of what's consideration, what are the different considerations while you're walking with the dog in India, then this would be a good place to start. There's a lot of discussion about leashes and accessories and all of those that you can take. How do you exit a room? How do you enter a building? All of these different things during leash walking. I think that's a really good, interesting course. I mean, all our puppy parents who have taken that course, I've only spoken really good things about it. So if there are people interested, they should go check it.
Yeah, and we've kept in mind that you have to introduce the country nuances, right? One rule cannot be applied everywhere. So keeping in mind that we are in India, we've discussed the actual problems that we face during a walk and how you can manage that. So yes, it can be of great help to people who are new pet parents or people who are who have dogs that are unmanageable on walks. So please get in touch. It's alpha.anvisinc.com. All right. Malvika, any last thoughts, or we can...
No, happy walking. Stay safe, but please go out walk. Walking a dog is still an essential item. So COVID or not, you've got to walk the dog.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for your time, Malvika. And
thank you. It was nice seeing you again.
Good night.
Good night. Bye-bye.